many.
Lulu neshama kavo imya.
Binyamin ben Abaya.
It's big mitzvah. I don't call it's betrothing. Just it's all kosher.
Okay. До свидания. Mara, до свидания. Thank you. Okay, Rabbi, tonight we have with us the great honor of Rabbi Moshe Sharhon, been a rabbi in the Gorski Shul for many, many years, teaching, spreading the Torah, and really leading the people in the right direction, and helping preserving the Sephardic tradition, as well as making sure the Gorski tradition is well and flourishing. And it's a great honor that the Rabbi found time for us, and thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you, Rabbi. I'm going to close the door.
Okay, I assume that anybody that's here is Gorski?
Yes, one guy who's married to Gorski, and everyone else is Gorski, and more people coming in. They're still running with the list.
That's fine. I want to know who I'm speaking to.
Yeah.
First, I'm not a speaker. I'm a teacher. My passion is to teach. So a little introduction. Let me introduce myself, and let me explain to you how I got to know Gorski people. My name is Moshe B'Tzalel Sharhon. I wasn't born like this. As a matter of fact, I was born and raised in Seattle, Washington. I'm from the Seattle Sephardic community. The Seattle Sephardic community from Turkey, the Isle of Rhodes. And years ago, I asked my parents if I could go to yeshiva. My father was shocked. My mother said, "I dare you." That meant going 3,000 miles away from home. And she says, you won't last a week. Well, to spite my mother, I went to yeshiva, and I was very homesick, but I stayed in yeshiva. And I've been in yeshiva for years, more years than your life. Baruch Hashem, thank God. Now, in the year 2001, I used to live at 343 Ocean Parkway. In the year 2001, there was a group of people who bought the house next door to me. And I looked at them, and my reaction was, a bunch of Russian people, they're going to build a synagogue. Okay, good. I, for all the years, prayed in the yeshiva that I learned in, and that's where I learned, that was my place. In the year 2001, I was saying Kaddish for my mother because my mother passed away. And my father, who lasted another year, a couple of months after my mother passed away, would come to my house. The Gorski shul opened up next door. I never heard of Gorski, never heard of Azerbaijan. I called them Russians. I learned since then I don't call them Russians. I learned. And I was saying Kaddish. Now, I was learning in an Ashkenazic yeshiva. And I teach in an Ashkenazic yeshiva. So I had to say Kaddish. I was saying one Ashkenaz Kaddish every day and one Sfard Kaddish every day. And I was very uncomfortable because I maintain my Sephardic tradition and my Sephardic way of praying. So, I was looking for a Sephardic place to pray. I came down because I have a cousin in Avenue S. came down to the Syrian community. And I was saying Kaddish in the Syrian community, Sephardic Kaddish. Very uncomfortable in the Syrian community. So, I found a little Bukharian minyan right around my house. So I went and I was saying Kaddish in this Bukharian minyan. And I like to teach. I'm a teacher. I'm not a speaker. I'm very uncomfortable standing here and speaking in public. I don't like speaking. But I do like teaching. And I started teaching there a little bit halacha, because they saw, hey, Sephardic rabbi, big long beard, looks impressive, and he's Sephardic. So I started teaching a little bit halacha, and I became friendly with two Gorsky young men. One, his name is Aaron. I don't remember his last name. The other one, his name is Solomon. I don't remember his last name. Both of them were members of the Gorsky community. When the Gorskys opened the synagogue at 347 Ocean Parkway, it was right next door to my house. So, I needed to say Kaddish. Aaron asked me if I could learn with him a little bit. My pleasure. So I started learning with Aaron. Right Sukkot, right at 2001, right after the Twin Towers incident. The shul had just opened up Rosh Hashanah, 2001, the Gorsky shul. So I started learning with Aaron every Shabbat afternoon. Me and him, we learned. We were the only ones we learned for one Shabbat, two Shabbats, three Shabbats, and then came another young man. And then came another young man. Till then, that Gorsky shul was older men who came to say Kaddish. When my father, and I told you, I was raised in Seattle, Washington, in the Turkish community. Now, we Turks, we have our own little cities. Like you have Baku and Kuba and Derbent. Never heard of these places until I got to know you people. And people from Baku are Baku, and people from Kuba are Kuba, and they're bent, and they got their own little things between their customs and cities. Well, we have ours. We have Rodis Lees and Tikirdalis. When my father came, my mother had just passed away, and when he came to visit, and he met the older Gorsky men, my father grabbed a hold of me and said, Moshe, these are our men. This is what I grew up with. It's the same type of community. My father couldn't speak a word of, I don't know your language, Russian, Juro, whatever it's called. Couldn't speak a word. I can't either. And in all these years that I've dealt with the Gorskys, I have not learned anything. And like they tell me over there, it's better that I don't know what they're saying. So, my father tells me he got to know some of the older men. Yeah, the men, the Gorsky men, they come to say Kaddish. They smoke and smoke. They just smell like smoke from a mile away. And they loved him and he loved them. They understood each other. They understood each other. They couldn't speak the language to each other. Their hearts connected. And my father was very excited that there's such a community, because I remember when I was a kid, I was born in 1950, that's a long time ago. I remember in the 1950s, the Rodis Lee community and the people, the Gorsky people, and where I came from, exactly the same type of people. Exactly the same. The same types of superstitions, the same types of lifestyle and culture. And there is a very unique culture that you people come from. You have a very rich tradition. And you should be proud of it. I consider, for me, it's a privilege just to speak to younger Gorsky people. Now, I have an agenda why I accepted Rabbi Ephraim's offer to come and speak. I have an agenda. I will tell you that I don't get paid. I've taught at the Gorsky Shul from 2001. I've gotten to know Gorskys well. Gorskys are one of the nicest communities that I have ever met, and I've met plenty. And I've gotten to hear customs and culture of the Gorsky community. My agenda, and again, I'm not a speaker. I'm very uncomfortable standing here and speaking. Over the years, I teach. I would love to have a question and answer period. But Rabbi Ephraim asked me to come and speak about Gorsky customs. And there are plenty. Just if anybody's coming in now, there was a beracha here before, and people left food they asked to eat. If anybody wants, please take. And have in mind, in memory of Binyamin ben Abaye. Gorsky names. I could go on and on for hours about Gorsky names, which is a study within itself. But I'd like to get to a couple points in my agenda. I raised my sons and my daughters to be Sephardic. I happen to be a very proud Sephardic Jew. To be Seattle, Turkish, Sephardic. And to be proud of it. My sons went through the yeshiva system, and they were known as the Sephardic boys. They went to Lakewood Yeshiva, and Baruch Hashem, thank God, they are very successful, each one in what he's doing. And they were very proud to be Sephardic boys. But the Syrian community looked at them like they're Ashkenazic. The Ashkenazi boys looked at them like they're Sephardic. So they came back and said, we're having an identity crisis. What are we? I tell them, you come from a Sephardic community, from the Isle of Rhodes, and from Tekirdag. It is a unique community. I told you before that when my father came and met the Gorsky community, he said, the Gorsky community is just like our community. And the truth is, it is. There are all kinds of Sephardic communities in the world. There is now something called Sephardic, which is basically the Syrian customs that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef instituted and he wanted all Sephardic people to be the same. I hope you've heard of Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He was a great, great leader, a great, great man. I remember when he was just starting out and he was young. He came to the West Coast, spoke in Los Angeles. A number of my girl cousins went down to Los Angeles to listen to him. And there he said, if you're Sephardic, you light candles on Friday night, you do it the Sephardic way. You say the blessing, and then you light the candles. Each one of my girl cousins was floored because nobody in our community did it that way. Nobody. All the ladies lit the candles, covered their eyes, said the beracha, and then uncovered their eyes. That's known in the yeshiva circles as the Ashkenazic way. But everybody in Seattle did that. I see I'm getting some puzzled looks. I'd love to teach you and go through customs. I'd love to, but not yet, not now. So my girl cousins came back to Seattle and asked the rabbi, Rabbi Maimon, just passed away at 101 years old. Great, great man. They asked Rabbi Maimon how he's supposed to light candles. There was a Sephardic rabbi down there in Los Angeles who said that's Ashkenazic. You got to change your custom. It's not Sephardic. You got to do it Sephardic. So Rabbi Maimon said, we do it our way. We have the Turkish custom. That's our custom. So I started learning a little bit in yeshiva, and I asked my mother, Zichronah Livracha, it's my father's yahrzeit in a couple days. My parents were great people. My mother did not cover her hair. She didn't know how to read Hebrew. Typical Jewish Sephardic lady. But when the salt spilled on the table, watch out. I say that, and I'm getting a lot of smiles here because that's Sephardic culture. I'm going to go off on all kinds of tangents. I'm sorry. When the shul over there at 347 got a hold of this book, Customs of Caucasian Jews. So they wanted to translate it to English. And they hired an Ashkenazic person learning in the yeshiva nearby to translate it to English. So he started translating it to English. And I met with him. And he says, what's this about spilled salt? I tell him, it's not, it doesn't register for you. Because it's not part of your culture. It's not in your bones. So I asked my mother, who taught you how to light candles? Was it an Ashkenazic Rebbetzin? She says, why are you asking? I say, because in the Shulchan Aruch, it says in the Sephardic, Ben Yosef says you're supposed to light it a different way. She says, don't tell me what it says in the books. I learned from my mother learned from her mother, and that's it. Don't bother me. Years later, as long as I mention my mother, I can't, I'm not going to be able to speak too much longer, but as long as I mention my mother used to say, if your right hand itches, it means you're going to get money. Okay? Now, in Sephardic life, there's a lot of things that people call superstition, which is not. It's based on from greater people than we are, who knew a lot more than we will ever know. They put into their lives certain things. So my mother told me, yeah, your right hand itches, you're going to get money. I looked and looked and looked and looked for years. I have libraries larger than, 10 times larger than this. I looked all over. As far as I'm concerned, any custom that the older people in the community tell you, keep it unless you find out that it's wrong. There are some wrong customs. Yes, sir.
Why is it true if your hand itches
Yeah, I like it. Very good. Good. Thank you.
It depends.
I'd love to have a question and answer period. But, okay, so now, years later, I called up my mother. I'm here married. I have a bunch of kids. Called my mother in Seattle. I tell her, Ma, I was just reading in a book. The author of the book, his name was Rabbi Eliezer Papu. He wrote a book called Pele Yoetz. He also wrote a book called Yalzu Hasidim with comments by the Chida. And there it says, if your hand itches, you're going to get money. And that's not a superstition. It's true.
From your mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, amen. Amen. Just keep scratching. Yeah. So my mother said, I told my mother, I found it in a book. She said, and if you wouldn't have found it in the book, you don't believe it? What's wrong with you? That's what my mother taught me. That's what her mother taught. That's it. Now, there is a culture that we have. There is a strong culture that we have. And as, here I want to get to my agenda. One more thing before my agenda. One of the most beautiful things that I found about the older Sephardic men, Gorski men and women, was they would walk into the shul, couldn't read, they couldn't pray, they didn't know how, but they would stand there respectfully and quietly. When it was time to stand, they stood. When it was time to sit, they sat. They didn't say a word. Totally respectful. And back in the year 2001, 2002, when I started teaching in the shul next door in 347, because I lived at 343, I told them, watch out, because the youth is going to become Americanized, and it's not going to last if you're not careful. That beauty is going to be lost if you're not careful. And as the youth starts to learn and become more religious and become more at home in a shul, they start talking. They're losing the respect. They don't have it. And whereas the older people, maybe they don't keep the halakha because they don't know. They never learned. They don't know the laws. But they keep what they know. And they kept it. And they keep it strong. The culture and the customs. And the laws, whatever they do know. Whereas the youth gets educated, a lot of the youth want to become Syrian Sephardic. And they start finding out different customs and they start changing. Adopting the modern Sephardic law and customs. And whereas the youth, the younger people, I got white hair, right? Mostly. Whereas the older people are still respectful, they're starting to lose it because they see the religious ones talking during the tefillah, during the prayers, not respecting a shul the way they were taught when they were kids. And the Gorski community is starting to become Americanized. Now that's not bad per se, but my agenda is you as Gorski youth and them down there on the other side of Ocean Parkway. It's all one. It is. You is the next generation of Gorskys. American generation of Gorskys. It's your responsibility to the people that you came from. They are great people. Your responsibility to make sure that you keep Gorsky customs, Gorsky way of praying, Gorsky way of living. It's your responsibility to make sure nobody else is going to do it for you. Nobody will. The responsibility is on you to perpetuate Gorsky life and not forget it and not have it blend in with a different type of Sephardic culture. Now, there are plenty of Gorsky customs. There is a Shulchan Aruch, there's a set of laws that every Jew keeps. And then there's customs. They're old Gorsky customs. Very old. I didn't know who I was going to be speaking to. I didn't know if I was going to be teaching or what I was going to be doing. I never met most of you, one or two people I met a little bit. I'm a Rabbi. I teach 5th graders in Hewlett, Long Island. I teach them beginning Gemara. And I wake up early in the morning and I travel to Hewlett early. I pray there. I learn somebody there early in the morning. So I'm not a late night person. I'm soon going to have to stop. However, I'd like to mention one Gorsky custom. And just to clear it up a little bit. And as I said, when I used to live next door to the Gorsky Shul, now I moved. We sold our house to the Gorsky Shul. Hopefully they will expand, build, whatever they're going to plan on doing, whatever. And Gorskys are Gorskys. Last minute. My Sephardic community, I was here tonight at 7:45. That's the way we are. So I got used to last minute things living next door to Gorskys. And one Shabbat ended, and Vitali, which I imagine you might know him, knocks at my side door and says, "Rabbi, can you give a question and answer period?" I say, "Okay, when? Which night?" He says, "Now." I say, "You kidding?" He says, "No." He says, "Well, when are people coming?" "They're here." I say, "Well, who was supposed to give it?" "We don't know." So, okay. I went inside, sat down, and there was one young man attracted to my beard, sat right next to me. He's been with me for the last probably 15 years. He's married now, has a child, has a beautiful Jewish family. One young lady, and they started asking questions, and it was eye-opening for me and for them. I'll cut that part short and let me get to a custom. Now, Gorsky customs, without learning properly, could be misunderstood. So here, I brought here, this is a calendar put out this year by an Ashkenazic genius in Israel. He puts out a calendar like this every year. It has in it a wealth of information. The other night, I was reading it, and he writes, Bizmanenu sherabu atzarot. Nowadays, we have all kinds of problems in the world, and there are people, unfortunately, that get sick, very sick. There are people that are ill. and we want to know what to do. So he says, Matzati mitziyah, I found a gem. This Ashkenazi person writing now, that could help a person who has a relative who's sick, or he himself or she herself is sick. And he digs up from the back of a Gemara, right there in the back, there's big Gemaras, big tall ones. So there's Gemara in the front, there's something called Tosefta in the back. He digs up from a Tosefta that almost very few people learn. And it says there that there was a lady in the days of the Beit HaMikdash, daughter got sick, and she said, Im ta'amod biti michoya, if my daughter gets better, etein mishkal lazaha, I will weigh her, and I'll give her weight in gold to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple. So he writes, you want to know something that will help people get better if they're sick? Yeshosim kaparami behemot. There are people that take animals and they make a kapara. They kill the animal and they give the meat to poor people. Vehu davar gadol, and this is a great, great thing. So this is an Ashkenazic rabbi writing in the year 2020 something that he found. It's a segula, it's a beautiful thing. If I'm not mistaken, in the Gorsky community, this had been going on for years and years and years and years. They called it a korban. I know people down there who tell me, yeah, we used to take a sheep and put it on the driveway in the old home, kill it, and then give the meat. And that's this. Ashkenazic people are just finding it. And in the Gorsky community, he brings this from Rabbi Chaim Falaji, a Turkish rabbi. The Turkish community and the Gorsky community have a lot in common. However, without proper education, they call it by the wrong name. Nowadays that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, you cannot bring a korban. Korban is a sacrifice. And if a person says it's a korban, it could be a big problem. Because we don't have a temple to bring a sacrifice into, and you don't make things a korban nowadays. You need proper education. Education of halacha in order to keep customs properly. So my agenda coming here is A, to speak to the Gorsky community. I speak over there plenty. To speak to the Gorsky community over here and tell them, and tell you, and anybody that you know, that you have a golden opportunity. The opportunity is to build your community. Nobody's going to do it for you. I'm going to go off again just for a moment. There's a great rabbi, now he's older and not well, Rabbi Solomon in Lakewood. Great man. When he was younger, he used to go to in December. And the Jewish media used to cover used to write it up. Rabbi Solomon is going to the Azerbaijan community, Baku, and he spoke there and blah, blah, blah. When I got to know the Gorsky community, I made an arrangement to meet with Rabbi Matisyahu Solomon. And I told him, I don't understand. Why do you go? I said it respectfully. Why do you go thousands of miles back there when you got thousands of Gorsky Jews in Brooklyn? A lot of them not keeping anything any longer. When they were back there, they ate kosher. They kept whatever they kept, whatever they knew. They come to the United States, and a lot of them, I don't want to say, Why don't you speak to them? Why don't you speak to the ones in Brooklyn? Why doesn't anybody do anything? Until my young men from 347 demanded kosher food at a Gorski wedding. They demanded, I remember the first wedding, and they demanded, we need one table of kosher food. His answer to me was, as far as I'm concerned, it's better for them over there. They're Jewish, they'll stay Jewish. I say, oh, wonderful, wonderful. I tell them, I'm in a classroom. If I would give up on a kid, they'd kick me out of my job. I tell them, the kid can't learn. Hello, you pay attention to the kid there. He's in your class. We have Gorski Jews all over the place. Who's helping them? Who's doing anything for them? He looked down and said, you're right, I should really call a meeting of the great rabbis and we should do something. I said, I'm not complaining to you per se, but where's the Jewish leadership? I had this meeting with him years ago. I don't see anybody. So like I tell them down there, and I'll tell you, if nobody else is going to do it, you got to do it yourself. You've got to make Gorski schools. You've got to make Gorski shuls. You've got to keep the Gorski customs. You should not blend into the Syrian community. They're Jewish, you're Jewish. But keep your Gorski identity. In Seattle, Washington, where I come from, there are two Sephardic shuls. They don't talk with each other. You know the politics. The Rodis Lees, the Kirdalis. I'm really Rodis Lees, but I was raised in the Kirdali shul because my grandfather had a fight with the Rodis Lees. So I got a little bit of both. In order to make sure that we kept our customs, they put out a Seattle Sephardic Siddur. And they put T for Turkish and R for Rhodes, wherever there's a difference. Somebody, and Baruch Hashem, you have an excellent rabbi here, there's got to be a Gorski rabbi, there's got to be a central Gorski committee that'll put together religious Gorski people to keep the Gorski culture and the Gorski community alive. It is, you owe it to your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and people that you never met. They were great, great people, and they put into your lives all kinds of customs, like, and there's a source for it. Somebody asked me, I was once teaching there on a Shabbat. I'm going too long. I gotta take my time. I gotta wake up tomorrow morning. Sorry. I was teaching there one Shabbat, and a Gorski man walked from Avenue Z on Shabbat. He came, and he was dehydrated. And I look at him. He says, Rabbi, I came to ask you a question. Is it true that you're teaching that we got to keep Sephardic customs? I said, you bet. And you got to keep Gorski customs, not just Sephardic customs. Because you open up any Sephardic book, and again, I hope you've heard of Chacham Ovadia Yosef. When he was young, he wanted all Sephardic people to be the same type of prayer, same customs. The older Sephardic Chachamim were upset with him. What do you mean? Moroccans have their customs, Turkish have their customs. Never heard of Gorski's then. But, so where do you learn the customs from? Well, thank God you have a Gorski rabbi that put out a book like this, and you should learn it. Classes should be given in it. But this doesn't answer everything. This does not have everything. Where do you learn it from? The first place to learn it from is speak to your older relatives, whether they're religious or not. Speak to your grandmothers, your grandfathers, great-grandmothers, if you have, and ask them what they remember. can you trust them? What do you mean, how can you trust them? They never learned Shulchan Aruch. Okay, you never learned Shulchan Aruch. You're right. But like my mother said, till you see it in a book, you don't trust me? I guarantee you're going to find it in a book, your customs. You will. There's got to be Gorsky rabbis, leaders. There's got to be Gorsky shuls. There's got to be Gorsky education. Because without education, you're likely to keep customs in a wrong way. And if a custom is wrong, it has to be changed. Out of everything that I do, I changed one custom that my father did. On Pesach, he used to say the Beracha al Achilad Matzah the whole Pesach, every day. I looked and I looked and I looked. Then I asked the older people, and I verified that it was a mistake. He agreed that he wasn't 100% sure that that's why my grandfather did it, and that I changed. Nothing else. It's hard to know the Gorsky customs. Okay. Okay, so it's hard to know. Somebody's got to spend the time and energy, learn it, keep it, teach it, and do it. It's your responsibility to your next generation. So, I'll leave you with one last thought. Over the years that I dealt with Gorskys in 347, I'm working now on the third generation of young men. The first group of young men got married, moved away because it's very hard to find places over there to live. And they moved away. Some moved to Israel, some moved down this way. I've raised the second generation Gorskys, and now we're on to the third generation of Gorskys that are coming into the shul. I want to end with the one thing I found over the years was I knew I was doing the right thing because the Yetzer Hara tried to get it to stop. When you're trying to do the right thing, you're bound to come into obstacles. One of the biggest obstacles was in my first group of young men, after a while, they started fighting with each other. Started a fight. This one said, I'd do this, that. I sat him down and I told him, listen here. You'll never do anything if you fight. Stay away from fighting. You'll never accomplish anything. You got to work together. So, I gave you over some thoughts. I hope that if just one person will take on himself or herself to build, to unite, to keep the Gorsky way of doing things, it was worth it coming here. I talk about the Syrian community. I came to Brooklyn in 1965. As a little 15-year-old boy, I did not have any relatives here. All by myself. I remember the Syrian community back in the 60s. It was nothing like it is now. Small, little community, a couple of shuls. And that's how, when I see the Gorskys, that's what it looked like, the Syrian community back then. Now, so many years later, it's a big, gigantic, flourishing community. My beracha to all of you is the Gorsky community should build and grow continue to flourish, continue to be a source of nachat to your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. And you should build the Gorski community into what it deserves to be. With that, thank you very much for listening. Thank you.